Thanks for having me. Look, I don't want to rehash all the same ground, so I'll keep it fairly brief. Look, we all know Melbourne's grown at an extraordinary rate. We've added 1.2 million people in just 13 years. Now, to put that's a 33% increase, so we've increased by a third in just 13 years. It's crazy. Now, just to put the population growth into context, it took Melbourne 170 years, that's 170 years, to reach a population of 3.3 million people in 2001. And took us around 170 years to build about 95% of the infrastructure that we have here today. Yet, by mid-century, Melbourne's population is projected to top 8 million people. So that's an increase of about 4.7 million people in just around 50 years. That shows you how big a task we've got ahead of us. Now, supporters of a big Australia, the so-called growth lobby of retailers, property developers, banks, etc., all the people Michael talked about, will tell us that we just need to build more infrastructure. Like you can just go, and this massive amount of infrastructure will suddenly magically appear. But of course, we're not stupid. We've sat here in the last 15 years with our own two eyes and looked around as everything has become crush-loaded. We've got crowded roads, crowded public transport, housing's become smaller and also more expensive, and our schools and hospitals are, of course, becoming overcrowded. And in fact, I can actually put some data to this. This slide up here is from the Productivity Commission's 2013 Ageing Australia report. And what it estimated is that Australia will need to increase its capital stock, which is primarily infrastructure. We'll have to build 5 times more infrastructure in the next 50 years than we built in the previous 50 years. It's obviously an impossible task, and it doesn't pass the laugh test. Now, this is an incredibly difficult proposition for a place like Sydney and Melbourne, and it's pretty obvious why. Both cities are already built out. We have very little available land. And what this means is that if you want to build a new road, a new subway, or even new schools, but in the case of new roads and new subways, you'll have to either bulldoze some of the most expensive homes in the world, or of course you'll have to tunnel under them, which becomes incredibly expensive. We've got water problems across Australia's major cities. If you want to increase the water supply, you're going to have to resort to expensive technological solutions like water desalination. In every case, it means that the cost to the existing resident will increase because the average cost of new infrastructure is a lot more than the pre-existing infrastructure. The costs rise. And also, the end result will be that we won't get the infrastructure. It just won't be built. Exactly what's happened over the past 15 years. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But hey, we just need to build more. Now, if I just make one final point. This is a key chart from Infrastructure Australia's recent report on the future cities of Sydney and Melbourne. It's an excellent report, but this is the key chart I want you to etch into your mind. And what it shows is the projections for Melbourne in 2046, when Melbourne's population is projected to hit 7.3 million people. And what Infrastructure Australia did, it showed 3 development scenarios. So-called low density, which is 60% infill, so-called medium density, which is 70% infill development, and so-called high density, which is 80% infill. In every single situation, so on the left here we've got the current situation, on the right is the 3 scenarios. In every single development situation, traffic congestion will get worse, access to jobs will get worse, access to schools will get worse, access to hospitals will get worse, and we'll have less access to green space, i.e. open space like parks and footy ovals, etc. Every single situation, Melbourne's living standards will fall. And what it also means is, even under the so-called low-density scenario of 60% infill development, Melbourne, by 2046, will have to squeeze in about another 1.3 million people into the existing suburbs. And what that means is that pre-existing areas, like the areas that you live in, that Melbourne's so-called missing middle, that the Grattan Institute says, will have to be bulldozed to make way for high-rise and medium-rise development. That'll be the end of your backyard. Your kids will have to go to high-rise schools, and we'll be living again in smaller and more expensive housing. Do any of you want this? Did you vote for this? or you're going to stand up and vote for a sustainable Australia and Taliban Oz tea?